Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Normally I'm here talking about all things sustainability, travel, tourism, blogging, anything eco-friendly, but it has been a couple of weeks since I have last been on camera, and that is just due to the current social and political climate. We're dealing with COVID-19, we've got the Black Lives Matter movement. I didn't feel like it was my place to put videos about conservation and sustainability out there when other voices could be heard. So what I'm doing today is sharing an article with you that I had come across in the last week or so because I think it's an important part of the conversation that's happening right now. It also ties into sustainability and conservation, and I really want to give this article an even bigger voice than it already has. I heard about this article when a former professor of mine shared it on her Facebook. The professor was at the University of Vermont. She taught zoos, exotics, and endangered species, my favorite class that I took at university. And we talked about, of course, endangered species conservation, but also about the social dynamics of the people living where those animals that we're talking about live. So it's not lions out there in the vast wilderness. These lions are living near communities. It's not elephants with tons and tons of land to walk around. No, they're trampling the land that people live on and need to survive. So we talked about a lot of those tough topics. A lot of those come up in this article, and I want to share it with you. So let's dive in. I want to start by, of course, introducing the author of this article. I'm going to be sharing different quotes that she provides in this piece, and try not to give too much of my own opinion. I want her words to be heard. So here's a little bit of background on the author. I did try to look up how to pronounce her name, but unfortunately I couldn't find any information on that online, so I'm going to do the best I can. This article actually talks about that being one of the problems with conservationists coming from afar to Africa, not trying to pronounce words correctly. I hate that I might be doing that myself, but I did try to do my due diligence and hope that she'll understand if she happens to see this video. You'll also notice that I am looking down throughout most of this video. It's because I have lots of notes here. I have my highlighted sections that I want to share with you, so please forgive me as I look down occasionally throughout this video. The author is Merlyn Nomusa Nkomo. She is a conservation biology master's student at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. She's an ornithologist and feels at home in the wild with a pair of binoculars. However, she also loves people, diversity of cultures, and strives in her work to bridge the gap between a sustainable coexistence between humanity and nature. That's why I want to read this article to you today. So this first quote that I'm going to share with you comes actually from the end of the article as opposed to the beginning, because I think it's a pretty heavy-hitting point and kind of encompasses everything that this article has to share. Like I said, I'm going to try not to give my opinion. I think her voice just needs to be heard. I want to be a conduit for that through a video source instead of the article. But if you want to read the entire article, form your own opinions, I'm going to link to it in the description down below. I do highly recommend that you read the whole article because I can't touch on all of it, but it is all very, very important in my opinion. So, the first quote. The researcher who fell in love with Africa and her wilderness from National Geographic films or zoos and shows will have a different commitment to the problem than the one who knows the hunger of an elephant raid, one who herded cattle in a village where lions prowl at night, and one who knows the true meaning of your life and next meal, depending on the environment you live in. Heavy quote. And I think it's just, you know what, I started to give my own opinion, but I really just want to share her words, and I just want them to be out there. So let's see what else she has to say. The status quo cannot persist because it begs the question, who are we conserving Africa for if the majority is not part of or interested in the solution? Just want to make a connection here. That ties into what the original quote was saying. Who are we conserving Africa for if the majority is not part of or interested in the solution? How can you be interested in saving elephants or saving lions when they come and raid your fields, when they come and slaughter the cattle that you depend on for your livelihood? We need to think about it in a different way, and that's what this article gets at. So let's keep going. Africa, deals with more poaching and environmental degradation with every year that passes. Africa has the youngest and fastest growing population in the world, and what we do today will set the pace and trajectory for the continent's development. Conservation in its current form will not be effective in Africa. Impactful and effective conservation efforts cannot exclude systems thinking and behavioral change. And I have that sentence kind of extra highlighted because of the term systems thinking. It means thinking of the system as a whole, rather than seeing a leak and slapping a Band-Aid on it. It's looking at the entire picture, figuring out, why is that leak happening? How can we fix it in a way that will be long-term? So systems thinking is going to be imperative for fixing conservation efforts in Africa currently. She says it takes a lot more than scientific brilliance to influence behavioral change. It takes passion and dedication to see that the problem is fixed, provided the real problem is known. Then the author talks about the differences between being an international student traveling to Africa, living out that Nat Geo dream, versus somebody who lives in Africa. And it's a really interesting perspective, so I'd like to share it. She says, a summer internship for a British young lady lands her a managerial research position over a local graduate who interned in the same place for a year, but has to give tours and host visitors to the facility. Organizations running volunteer projects targeted at giving internationals a green tourism experience and university credits while priced too high for local students to afford and participate in. Even I tried to join these volunteer programs. Despite my endurance, I realized they would not accept me if I did not pay the amount upfront in American dollars, never mind the knowledge I had to offer or gain. I know I said I was going to not give my opinion, but I think that is part of the root of the problem. That's part of the systems thinking, is almost preferring people who live outside of Africa to come in, charging them to do conservation work, when there are people who live there, who live and breathe that experience every single day, who have a lot to offer and to gain from the experience, and not offering them those positions because they can't afford to pay for them. I think that's a system that needs to be readjusted. I think it also gives the green tourism industry a bad name. She says, conservation is not a cheap field to be in, funny enough. She says funny enough because earlier in the article she was talking about how most people don't get into conservation work for the money, but it is expensive to get into. She says it's expensive to get the right and appropriate gear, clothing, and to be at the right place. She's been to week-long conferences where meal tickets were 200 Rand. That in itself excludes an entire demographic. And I know one group in particular, the Painted Dog Research Trust, they're working to fix this problem. When I went to Zimbabwe to meet up with Greg Rasmussen, who owns the Painted Dog Research Trust, we got to see the work he's doing, not only for painted dog conservation, but for sustainable development for a compound to house local students to do conservation work. He recognizes that a lot of the conservation opportunities in that area are just, they're priced for international students who can pay a lot of money to do these green tourism volunteer experiences. But there are people that live right there that want to be a part of that conversation, to be part of that research, and he is doing that by building cost-effective dorms, conference spaces. He wants to bring everyone together internationally and locally, have it be a place that everyone can afford to be a part of. I would like to eventually do a video on the Painted Dog Research Trust. Maybe that'll come sooner than later since it does tie in so well with what this author is saying. Yeah, she says it is important to get the voices of Africans themselves in these conversations. Why are the people who live there, who are most affected by these decisions, not a part of the conversation? She says, most conservationists do not even bother to learn local languages or pronounce things right, and they assume their surveys with people of different languages and cultures are not on a superficial level. And that's what I was referring to earlier when I said that I really hope I didn't mispronounce her name. It clearly is an issue and something that needs to be corrected. She says that almost all Black folks in conservation identify as science communicators because we have to double up for this role and educate our community the way we know works. Again, think that's super important. Won't go into my beliefs on this one. I think she nails it. She says she has seen people's lives change literally from one encounter or chat about vulture conservation. All of this I do without a budget or benefactors, without colorful handouts and pamphlets. Then she says one of the most hard-hitting quotes in this entire article. People do not care about how much you know until they know how much you care. Conservation needs to decide what the primary focus is. Publications and discoveries in Africa, traveling and working in remote and picturesque places. I believe this should take second place to solving the problems that will destroy it for all future generations. And that's where I'm going to finish the article today. Like I said, if you want to read the whole thing, it is linked in the description down below. I definitely think it's worth a read, whether you work in the conservation field, you just generally love wildlife, or you want to hear about firsthand experience from someone living and working in the conservation field in Cape Town, South Africa. That was a heavier video than I normally do, but like I said, I think this is something that needs to be brought up. I think it's the right time to do it. It's something that I learned about years ago, got to see it firsthand when I traveled to Zimbabwe, but don't get me wrong. I was still a tourist going out there to get my wildlife photos of lions and elephants and was appreciative that I had at least some background information from that professor that I had at University of Vermont in the back of my mind saying, yes, these animals are beautiful, they're wonderful, but they do cause problems for the people who live here. So we need to think about a systems thinking approach to solving the conservation problem in Africa. And this author here did a beautiful job describing the problem and maybe some solutions. So until next time, take care.